right, welcome back, folks. This is Unofficially Opinionated. I'm here with Nate and Tim
Yes,
as
it is.
usual, and our special guest here today is Kumar. Welcome, Kumar. How you doing?
Welcome, Kumar.
Thank you so much. Do you guys have like an applause like soundtrack or anything going on to welcome me?
So we
It's
tried.
funny that you ask. The guys didn't too much appreciate me using that, so
Sound.
I stopped because they were
Okay,
complaining. But
Yeah, it didn't
Yeah.
come off right. It
because
didn't come off
it
but
right.
was
So
in the writer that I sent you guys as far as this, like
yeah,
the blue jelly beans, and I wanted some
well,
soundtrack,
right.
but that's
oh
fine.
yeah, right.
Well, let's see what I can do about that.
All right, sounds good. Great to be here.
Oh,
Are you trying to do the clap?
great, great. Oh, so happy to have you here. So happy to have you.
What? What
Uh,
is going on?
We got it. We got it. We got it.
Okay.
All
Yes.
right. All right. Enough funny business. So today we're here to kind of talk to Kumar about the idea of, modern Christianity and what's kind of going on in the world today, given some of his experience and expertise. So, Kumar, you were formerly a pastor by profession for several years and then kind of transitioned out of that. So maybe talk to us a little bit around, how you got into being a pastor in the first place. What kind of drove you to do that as your profession?
Yeah, I still see myself as a pastor. I think, one of the things that's tough, even today when people ask me, oh, what do you do for a living? There's like a long kind of like pause because I'm not sure
Pause.
like what I should say because, in my heart of hearts, I've always been a pastor. And I have one of those weird geeky stories where from birth, like from the youngest memory, I've always knew I was going to be a pastor. Okay. And part of it is because my parents were very religious and they dedicated me to be a pastor before God. So they've always kind of told me. So I don't know. I don't know if it was they were just kind of like brainwashing me, so I had no other choice. So it's one of those like, you will be nothing but a pastor. But even like my third grade teacher, art teacher, Mrs. Kilstrom will say, I remember on the playground, kids were like, I'm going to be a fireman. I'm going to be, a pilot. And Kumar, what are you going to be? I was like, I'm going to be a pastor. And she's like, I've never heard of anyone saying they're going to be a pastor. So, even in school, I was like as a teenager, I was that guy that like was in charge of the youth group. I started my own ministry where I went around the Midwest in America, and a group of like 10 of us teenagers went and preached in churches. I was like heavily into like Christian rock music. I was like
Oh my
in the
goodness.
scene. Like I was like geek guy. Here's the worst part, guys. I had a pair of jeans in high school, my senior year, where I got this guy who was like a really incredible Gene. If you're still out there, you did this. And he got a
Definitely.
marker. He got a like serious, like thick marker and drew the beasts from Revelation on my
Oh, wow.
jeans.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
He had like the
What?
whore of Revelation 4 on there. It was like there was a big 666, and I was walking around like proud. Okay, like I did not. It was
What
damaging,
is
but
this?
yeah. So that was my life, and my freshman year in college, I went and became a theology major. But even with that, to be honest with you, I was always kind of like the bad pastor. I was always like,
Mm.
like no matter what, I was always on the fringe. Like even in theology, like I was like walking around campus, and a friend of mine, a friend of mine once, we made a pact our freshman year in college. His name was Roger, and he was like, bro, if you ever see me walking around campus with like a big thick Bible, you have permission to like slap me, like just slap
Right?
me, like.
Oh,
So I was never
oh
like that theology
yes,
major that was like just
yes.
hanging out and like
Ah,
like studying Greek and being a total like geek looking for a wife. Like I also like
Yeah.
lived my life,
In the
and
nursing department.
yes, looking for
ah.
the nurses who can play piano. That's important.
Yes.
But
Oh my
so I've
goodness.
always
Yes.
kind of been on the fringe, but I've also had a very deep love for God and for people who don't know God, which
Nice.
leads you to
That's
that's probably why I got kicked out of church because I didn't fit in.
Right. So
Yeah,
so I guess for
it's a
people
club.
that don't know, I met you, Kumar, because when I moved to Maryland about, I don't know, somewhat around 14 years ago or so, I was kind of church hopping around and found this progressive church. But at that time, it was maybe a little bit past where I was as far as being progressive. I wasn't
Hmm.
quite there, but it was the best fit for me at the time. And so
Okay.
you were there, I got there. That's kind of where I met you. And that place just was kind of the first church for me that I could call a home church that was
Hmm.
not my parents' church. Because
That's
my father
awesome.
is a minister, so
Yeah.
I would always kind of go to his church. And then in adulthood, you might go somewhere when you're in college or kind of slip around, but
Yeah.
to have kind of a home church, that was kind of my first place. And I remember, talking about rebels, one thing that struck me was that church was and kind of is still, um, doesn't really flaunt the particular denomination. It's really kind of, we are a Christian church first.
Yeah.
Other stuff is kind of secondary, and that really spoke to me for sure.
Oh.
That's interesting. You said you weren't that level of progression. Like, so Christian and I were roommates, um, and I was very conservative.
Yeah,
Weirdly
you know
enough.
how many times Nate burned and threw away his Michael
Oh,
Jackson paraphernalia and
You
his
know, you know how
yeah,
much
VHS
his
that's worth on
Michael
paraphernalia.
eBay now, Nate?
Jackson. I'm trying to
He
tell
had
you.
so many times
I'm
he's like,
just
you
no,
know what, this stuff is
I.
evil, burning all of it,
Oh,
and
it
then
was
he'll go back and
so
collect it
bad.
again, and then he would have another revelation.
Yeah, and I wasn't a pastor's kid, so he was far more like liberal than I was.
That's funny. You
So that's interesting
what's
that he.
what's hilarious is I've been to those bonfire vespers where
Oh
they
yeah.
would like backmask, like some of the songs. They're like, "Can't you hear the word devil in here? Like this is what they're doing." And like kids are crying and they're like, putting like $1,000 worth of like LPs in the bonfire. And
Yeah.
even back then I was like, bruh, I'm not doing that. I am not doing
Yeah.
that. No, no.
Oh man.
Oh man,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah. So Kumar, so from going to kind of from a young age, knowing, hey, this is what I want to do with my life, and then kind of doing it as a profession, full time, professionally paid to do this. Um, how did you get to, I guess, where you are now, where maybe that's not your official, paid role per se,
Yeah.
but still have that kind of in your heart?
Yeah, I mean, I broke up with the church, but we're on good, we're on a good level with each other. There's no, yeah,
Aw.
there's
He
no
said he broke up
baggage.
with him.
We still have, they still pay me as, what's that thing they pay you once you get divorced? Like there's like a, yeah,
Alimony
so
or
I still get alimony because I'm still in the retirement
really?
plan. Yeah, so
Oh, that's
Wow.
perfect.
yeah,
Perfect.
Oh,
yeah, so
oh, I like how you did
yeah,
that.
that's right. So I got to still be, and I still identify myself with my denomination. And in fact, even when I stopped pastoring the church that Christian went to, I still go there as a church member.
Yeah.
I'm more low key, because no one knows who I am now because it's been so many years, and the people who know who I am are just kind of like, "Why are you here?" Um,
Oh,
but it's an
oh boy.
interesting thing because like 30 years ago, I remember like being the young hip pastor that people were so shocked because I would like sit on a stool and preach, and they were like, "That is so avant-garde. Look at this
Radical.
guy." And it's so funny because yesterday when I was at church, there's a young pastor now, and she had like she was preaching, she had faded jeans with the biggest ripped holes in her jeans. Like I
Oh
I
my
actually
goodness,
took a
I've never
picture
seen
and
this.
was like, "Oh Lord, what is happening to these
Wow.
young people?" you know so I do still very much identify as a as a pastor and as a follower of Christ. What I don't identify myself as is like a congregational pastor. I've feel like for about 30 years I've been a chaplain of Christians, and sometimes kind of playing the role as an outreach person, but mostly just creating like programs for church people who really don't want to do anything but but do what they want to do in the church. So, I started a new ministry called conciergeminister.com, which the tagline is the pastor you've always wanted without the church. And to be honest with you, I started it kind of as a joke because I work, in the business sector now. And I was like, I miss pastoring. Let me create a website, and I did it. And it's just like blown up. I mean, I have over 1,000 people
No.
on my roster. I have people calling who are just lost without the church. I have a funny thing to tell you. I work at Panera in the morning for about 2 hours before like my actual work day begins. And so when I say work, I don't mean I work for Panera. I just work at Panera.
Oh, thank you.
And
Oh, okay.
I was like,
yeah.
so you're a barista for 2 hours.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then you
yeah.
go and do ministry.
Many
No,
jobs.
I actually belong to their free sip club. I don't know if you have that in France, but
Yeah, that thing is dangerous.
it
because
is awesome.
I've been getting like 2 drinks a day because I'm like, I got to get my money's worth out of
Why
this thing.
not?
So
Yeah, why not? I pay $10 a month. I get unlimited drinks. I go there in the morning. I do like my Bible study. I do my journaling. I do other stuff before 9 o'clock in the morning. And they have like this cork board outside of the bathroom. And so I put my business card and it says, ask me to pray for you. You guys, I've had to replace it like 6 times already in the last like 4 weeks.
Ooh,
Because
Wow.
people
That's good.
people just, they want prayer. They're not going to walk into a church. They're not going to be like, calling a pastor at some, random church in the yellow pages. Not that we have yellow pages anymore, but they do have a need, and it could be spiritual or it could be personal, and they want somebody to help them.
Yeah.
So even like I wear a t-shirt in the winters because it's a long sleeve shirt, and in the back of it has massive words that say, ask me to pray for you. And my wife has made me not, like, she's like, you're not allowed to wear that when the kids are with you. Because I get people just stopping me like randomly, like at Costco, at Panera, and they're like, I need you to pray for me. And I'm like, okay, I have my 3 kids with me. And I'm like, my kids are like awkward, just sitting like for 20 minutes as someone's telling me their life
Right.
story. But she's like, you're not allowed to wear this because the kids don't, like, they feel awkward, So I've
Yeah.
kind of realized that, even without getting paid to be a pastor, I can still do ministry, and that there's lots and lots of people out there who are looking for some answers in their
Yeah.
life.
Very cool.
I really like that. I left the church. I didn't actually intend to leave the church. It just happened, and I'm happy that it happened. But I totally agree. There are people who I have encountered, people who definitely want maybe like a spiritual connection or something, like they feel like it's there, but the church is just, and religion in general, I think for a lot of them, a lot of my friends here in Europe, they want nothing to do with the church. They want nothing to do with organized religion. And I myself have a really I have a problem with organized religion. I told my mom. So we entered the church when I was, I think, somewhere around 3 or 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But she had been a part of the church before, and then she left, and then she came back. And my grandma was part of the church. So I was raised in this religion, right? And I was always trying to do what was right. I was in Pathfinders. I love me some Pathfinders. I played Bible Bowl. I was really good at Bible Bowl.
He really was.
Stuff
Yeah.
like that. but like I don't know. I was always trying to do what was right, and I found out that it's not. What they were telling me was right, and I found out that it wasn't right at all.
Mm.
It was very, for me, it was very toxic. It stunted me, and I just, even now. So anyways, I had talked to my mom just recently, but I told her I'm glad, and I tell God this is what I told her. I'm glad that you found God, and then you taught me who God was, because I really love that. But I absolutely hate religion.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, I had to separate the two because they're not the same. So I think that whatever it is that you're doing, you are right. Not that you need my like affirmation or confirmation,
Yeah.
but I'm like,
Nate, a
yes.
seal of approval.
Well,
So
thank-
when
That is.
Thank you.
good, Kumar. Yeah. Yeah. So Nate, when you say religion, what do you mean when you use that term?
Well, I say organized religion generally when I'm talking about my disgust. I'm trying to make it sound, flowery and stuff like that, but my dislike. Um, what I mean is taking the concept of God, or even just maybe like taking the Bible and building human beliefs and laws off of that, and then asking people to abide by these rules as if they are like God given, right? So you'll take the concept of God, you'll be like, God is this or whatever. And in order to get to know God, you have to do this, this, this. So, like, I was fasting every week. I was like every Friday. I was going to church multiple times a week, praying 3 times a day. I was reading my Bible. I was the one carrying around my Bible on
Yeah.
campus. Excuse me. It wasn't a big Bible. It was a small Bible, but I was like literally. I took that everywhere with me. I'm not lying. Like Christian could attest. I don't know if he remembers, but I had my Bible everywhere. If I was taking anything, it was going to be my Bible. Like whatever. It was whatever. So like that's what I mean when I talk. And then when I say organized religion, I just mean like they've taken it and it has become this kind of like group think sort of thing, and they've organized it into a, I don't know, like a business or a how to act, a kind of club sort of thing. I don't know. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I think probably the greatest disservice that organized religion has given the world is the fact that we claim to have an answer to everything.
Oh
And
my goodness,
part of
yes.
this is kind of, it's kind of the Newtonian understanding where it's, Newton's laws, where there's always going to be an answer. There's a process, right? So A goes to B to C to D to E to F, and that's kind of how I think modern Christianity has kind of come out of, especially because of kind of the Anglo-Saxon influence that we've had. And so now that we've lived in kind of a postmodern world, relativity is really it's where we are today. It's
Hmm.
we don't have all the answers. I love it when somebody asks a pastor, like a random moral or ethical question. Let's just say abortion or something related to that, and they're like, oh yes, there's like 16 Bible verses that talk about.
Oh,
No,
yep,
there's not.
yep.
There's not a book in the
Yep.
Bible called abortion. Okay, the book of abortion. And so we have lots of clues about what God prefers, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we know what God wants. And so there are some very distinctive things. Like, we know God doesn't want murder. I mean, he says that, right? He knows that he doesn't want you to steal and be a jerk and take somebody else's spouse. Like, there's some basic laws that God gave us to govern, but there's so many other things in the world that we don't know. And Christianity in particular, and organized religion, claims to have a hold on knowing the answer to everything. And I think in the world that we live in today, that's probably the greatest disservice and injustice that we've given the world, is to claim that we have the answers instead of just saying, I don't know, let's figure this out together.
Yeah. Well, trying to
Absolutely.
get trying to get organized religion to say let's figure this out together is I don't know. It's like, what who's that Greek, um was it Sisyphus? Was it Sisyphus pushing
Yes,
the
the cart up the
stone up the
hill.
hill?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he can never get it to the top. Yeah, that's a never ending. That won't go anywhere in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking in the Bible study a couple mornings ago at church, and we were just discussing the idea around, you know, religion being almost like training wheels to kind of help a child, you know.
Mm.
So when we tell a child, "Hey, say sorry," even when they're not sorry, that's not a rule for living to always say you're sorry. But when you're a small child, we make you do it so you can start understanding how saying sorry works and when to use it, and that it's important to do it. Once you're 25, 30 years old, no one's going to force you to say sorry, because one, that's not even the point, and two, saying sorry in an empty way, as we know now, doesn't do anybody a service. you know, so
Yeah.
so looking at even the way the Bible is, like, it's good. The religion is good as a way to help people kind of get a base understanding of, hey, how does this stuff work? Where should I be? Kind of a ballpark area. But again, to your point, Kumar, the deep questions, a lot of things we don't know because it wasn't written to us. It wasn't written in our language. It was written by human beings with different contexts culturally. Add all that together, it's hard to say a definitive yes, no about most things. But again, if you're going to have a club and say who's in and out of the club, you kind of all of a sudden need to have some ways to know who's in and who's out. So otherwise, how do you measure the club is growing and doing well if you don't know who's in the club?
But like, is it supposed? Okay, well, I mean, Kumar, you said that you were no longer in the club, right? Like you were no longer.
I'm not paid by the club. You know,
Right.
I'm not an employee of the club. I mean, I definitely resonate with the club, but I'm definitely not somebody who is going to champion the club, because that's not my mission anymore, right? I mean, my mission is for people to know and love God, and let them know that God loves them, despite how screwed up we are as people, and that's it. God is love. That's it.
When I left the club, or just before, just before I left the club, I remember, and this is also before I came out the closet. I remember telling my mom, I was like, I'm reading. So I was reading the Bible quite a bit, and praying quite a bit. I'm not sure if that helped very much, but the things that I was understanding, I feel like I'm getting feedback. Am I getting feedback?
Yeah,
Do you all
I
hear
do
that?
hear a little echo.
I do hear echo.
It's all good.
Okay. So, anyways, when I went to my mom and I was like, listen, I feel like in the churches that I'm hearing there, or that I'm going to, they are being a little, they're not teaching what I feel like they should be teaching, and that would be actually God's love. I remember, and I will never forget, a pastor did an entire sermon on the word when, WHEN. And his premise was not if, not eventually, but when. You know, like that was the entire sermon. And I was just like, but that, first of all, it made an entire new rule to living in this club. So that was one thing. And the other thing was, it did not speak anything about God's love, about who, the fact that God gave these 10 commandments not to be like strict, rigid things like whatever, but if you step back and look at it, he's like, treat each other right. Like I'm telling you, this is how you live, because you're not going to. Y'all stepped off the right road, so now I'm telling you, this is the road you're going to lead.
Yeah.
You're going to be going down. Here's what you would normally be doing. This is what you should aim for. Treat each other right, sort of thing. There was none of this. There was all of this rule, just like staunch. I don't know. It was just whatever. And then eventually I left, and then I contacted my mom years later, like a decade or more later, and she said, "You know what, Nate? I'm starting to see you were right." So I'm glad that there's somebody whose point is actually to teach God's love, because I kind of feel like that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I would say that, when Meghan Markle got married, and is it Harry? Was that his name?
Yeah.
Harry, yes. I was all about that.
So the bishop that did the sermon for Harry and Meghan, I listened to his sermon, that wedding homily, every year at least once, because it is the best homily on love. I mean, he used that, like, 19 minutes to not even do a wedding homily, but just to talk to the world about what love is. And it's really what the world needs is to really, I mean, I know it sounds so cliche, but it really is, an idea of what the world needs. And one of the things that reminded me of this is I'm a Mac guy, an Apple guy.
I'm sorry.
And
God bless you. No.
and clearly I'm the only one that's not having any kind of interference or or technical problems. But yeah, so I used to go to the Apple store like all the time. They have what they call the geniuses, and you ask them questions to help you with stuff. And I was having a problem with something, and I was like freaking out because it was like working on my sermon. I think it was like a keynote or something, which is called PowerPoint for you guys. And so I scheduled an hour with this genius, and she sat with me, and I was showing her how I was trying to export like my online Bible into like my keynote, right? And there was some bug or glitches or whatever. And she had just this kind of face, and she looked at me and she's like, "So is that what the Bible looks like?" And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "I've never seen what a Bible is. I mean, I've heard of the Bible, but I don't know what a Bible is."
Okay.
And I kind of like looked at her like she was crazy, and she looked at me like I was nuts. And I kind of had this moment where I realized like most people don't know what the Bible is. They've never even like they don't even know what it is. If it was an actual book and it was sitting in a room with a bunch of books, they wouldn't know what a Bible is and how to differentiate what it looks like compared to even what is in the Bible, right? So we are so religiously ignorant, meaning just people in general, about even what the Bible says. And so for me, I kind of realized, I don't know if I should even necessarily even start teaching about the Bible, like what we typically do. Like we want you to know the doctrines. Like we got to go to such baby steps. Like we got to like cut up the vegetable for the baby before we even expect them to eat something solid, And so that's where I have kind of figured out where most of the world is they don't need biblical knowledge. They need to fully understand God's love before they can even figure that part out. And I don't know about you guys, but whenever you like have a church meeting or evangelistic series, it's all about doctrinal and dogma to try to shove knowledge down people's throat. When people like they're choking on it, they can't absorb it because we're not even at that place. And so that's kind of where I've kind of backtracked in my own ministry and said, look, you know what? As Paul says, these are milk bottle Christians, and this is what I need to really start helping people figure out who the love of God is.
Absolutely.
Can I ask you a question? I don't know if you had a question to ask Chris.
Go ahead, Nick.
No, go ahead.
Or Tim.
Go ahead.
No. Okay. So I just recently I was thinking of it because of the Bible, and I forgot exactly because I didn't write it down, which I probably should have. But I thought something along the lines of people take the Bible and then they try to discover they use the Bible to act as if they know who God is, when I feel like a person should get to know who God is, and then they would understand what the Bible is saying. I don't know if I said that right, but I think it was a little bit different in my head, where I felt like I remember when we were in school, when we were in university, and even before that, I mean, I could quote the Bible really well, probably not as well as some theologians, but I could quote the Bible really well, but I knew that I did not have a relationship with God. I didn't know who God was. I thought that having this knowledge of the Bible was what constituted a relationship. And I remember, Christian remembers this because he told me that I did this a lot, where I'd be like, God told me, or something like that, or something to that effect. Be like, God told me, blah blah blah.
God told you a lot of stuff back in the day.
God told me a lot of stuff.
Very directly, very
but
often. He's like, should
But
I eat the Wheaties or the Captain Crunch?
Yes, yes.
He's like,
And
wait,
God
what?
has an opinion. God has a strong opinion. Yeah.
Captain Crunch, absolutely.
Mhm.
100%. Yes. So like I don't know, like I was using the Bible as a reference, and I remember a friend also told me, but here in France, said that the Bible has the answers to everything in life, which I disagreed with, but I was still like coming into my own, so I didn't quite know how to rebuttal that. But I was like, I don't think that that's true. But it's true that you can go into the Bible and try to find out how to lead your life. I don't know if it's the best way to do it, but after, like I said, just afterwards, I was like, I realized that when you get to know who God is, which is what I decided to do, to get to know who God was for before trying to apply the Bible, you understand, you see the Bible in a whole different light.
Yeah.
It does. It makes the Bible makes more sense. You understand that I don't know you, whatever. So, what do you think about that? Like, it sounds like that's what the path you're going down anyway. Is like you're saying, don't give them the Bible. Like you said, they're just drinking milk, right? So like,
Yeah. So what the question you have to ask is how is God manifested into this world? Right? Is the Bible the only source of understanding who God is? And for me, the Bible is definitely a source of who God is. But what else do you have that brings illumination to who God is? Well, there's nature.
Mhm.
You know, there's God's creation, which is probably one of the great. You know, when I was a pastor, I used to get really frustrated because people would say, you know, I don't need the church. I mean, I go on hikes and you know, I experience God. I was like, no, going on hikes don't pay tithe. Okay, that doesn't help. Okay, go on a hike after church. But you know, for me, it's how do you experience God? You experience God through nature and creation. You experience God through His written word. You experience God in worship,
Mhm.
corporate worship. You experience God through like-minded people, right? And other people speak God's truth to you. You know, so there's a whole you figure out God through prayer and meditation, right? So there's a whole litany of tools that God has given us. What we have done is we've kind of just used these 66 books, you know, that we call the modern Bible as this is the only way that we can know God. And Nate, you're absolutely right. Like you can use the Bible to explain anything away. Just as you can use the U.S. Constitution to do the same thing as well, right? Like people look for that, right? So in the same way, you have to be able to say, what do you want people to know? And what I want people to know is not necessarily the scholarship of the Bible. You know, like right now, I'm reading the Bible through this year. I'm reading it every single day, and like 60% of it, it's boring. You know, I'm like, why? You know, I used to teach, you know, read the Bible and find how it's relevant for you today. And you know what?
yeah.
If you read through the book of like Numbers, there's nothing relevant that you're going to find today. Okay. so you know, you have to take the big picture and you have to say, okay, what is the Bible saying about God's character? And for me, it's not necessarily you only have to read the Bible to figure God out. I want people to understand, not for knowledge, but to feel the heart of God. That like one of the things I say, I work with the LGBT community. I'm the chaplain for a very large LGBTQ organization, and one of the
Kinship, right?
I'm sorry.
Kinship?
Yeah, kinship.
Yes, I was a part of
Oh,
Kinship.
very good. We'll have to get you back in membership. So uh, our European allies, you know, for kinship. But one of the things that I talk to so many people, you know, especially who are kind of about to come out of the closet, or people who are, you know, discovering whether, you know, they're questioning, you know, trans issues. And one of the things that I often say, like a broken record, is I say you have to realize that God created you. He is your creator. He's the one that designed you for the way that you are today. And so what you see is imperfection, what you see is a brokenness. And that is true. There is a brokenness and imperfection, partly due to sin. But what does God see? He is unable to see your brokenness and your frailty. He sees perfection because he created you. And if you could just get a sliver of what God sees in you, you would be blown away, and it would change the way that you look at yourself and the way that you carry yourself in life. Like, it's like David, like when you read the book of David, pardon me, when you look at the life of David through Kings, and you're like, how does God see him and say, this is my beloved? Like, I love this guy. He's an amazing, like, what are you talking about? He was the worst father. He was a womanizer. He allowed incest to take place in his house and didn't do anything about it. He murdered somebody. Like, the guy was a dog. And yet God is like, he's a twinkle of my eye. Like, what is God saying? Well, what God is seeing, something we're unable to see, and that is God sees the perfection of what he originally designed David to be. And so when you talk to people in the world, like, if you help them really figure out that God sees something that they're unable to see, and that he loves them despite their own flaws, it's going to change the way people feel about themselves and the way that they're able to approach life as well.
That's interesting.
I like that. I like that.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah. That is something that's very, I feel like I'm just like hogging this whole whatever. So y'all like jump in if you ever feel like whatever. But like, I feel like the LGBT community needs that, being part of the LGBT community and knowing that, like, for example, now I know, the trans rights, or the fight, the battle that they're going through, feeling like they are like abandoned. A lot of people will just abandon God because of the club, because of the church.
Yeah.
Not thinking that they are one and the same. And I kind of feel like that's the reason. That's what I told my mom anyway. But I feel like that's the reason why, one, God kicked me out of the closet, and then two, I ended up just drifting away from the church because the people that he has used, the people that he has reached through me, and I did literally nothing. Well, as far as I know, I didn't do anything. Were not well. They weren't going to share. And I mean, they felt like God was attacking them. They didn't. I have an actual friend who's probably going to listen to this podcast, who told his parents, I want nothing to do with God, and who now prays. It's just because I tell him, like, he called me up. He was going through a really, really hard time, and I was like, oh, you'll be fine. And I didn't want to be casual about it, but I knew he'd be fine because I prayed for him, and I told him, I tell everybody, when I pray, God hears me. I don't know how exactly he's going to answer, but I know he's going to answer. So I told him he'll be fine. He ended up being like, when I say this guy ended up being fine, like I had to remind him of the hard time that he went through. He came out so well on the other side. Like, I was just like, no, God, can you do that for me? Like, my goodness. But anyway,
Yeah.
But they definitely need to know that God, that, it's really weird how that is so important, needing to know that God loves you, or if you don't believe in God, that this higher being loves you. I don't know.
Yeah, and part of that comes from, let me give you two examples from the Bible. The only two times before the crucifixion story that we see God, when we talk about like God the Father, or kind of the capital G guy talking in the New Testament, is two places. Is when Jesus is baptized, and what does he say? This is my son with who I love and am proud of. Okay, there's such an innate need, that Freud was right about the whole daddy issues. Like, we all have parental issues, right? So, like, what does God say? The very first thing is he says, "This is my son who I love and who I'm well pleased with, who I'm so proud of." And the second time you see the same exact kind of language is in the Transfiguration, where, Jesus is up in the mountain. He's with, like, James and John. And I think Andrew is up there. I can't remember. And God speaks again. And they hear him say, "This is my son who I love." Like, that is the core of what humanity needs, is to know that we're loved despite that. And Nate, to your friend who's mistreated for being gay, I sincerely, as a active member of the Christian church, fully apologize and ask for forgiveness for the behavior that he and others who are listening today have felt from the church. Because the one thing, whether you're gay or straight, that you need the church to remind you of is that you are loved. You can be questioning, you can be figuring things out. I always go back to the story of the prodigal son. Like, that father, like, that boy took his money. Like, do y'all know what that means?
Yeah,
Like, he
right.
took his money. Like, he didn't invest it. He, like, misspent it, right? He like slept and ate with the pigs. Like, for Jews to even have that concept of the idea, like Jesus got rid of 2,000 pigs and threw them over a hill.
Right.
And no one cared about that, right? But the boy's like eating slop with the pigs. And what does he do? The Bible says that before the father even knew if the boy was going to repent or even say he's sorry, the Bible says that he saw the boy a far distant away, and the father ran and embraced the boy. Like, I'm getting chills. I'm about to, like, cry. Like, it is like, like, to me, that is like the greatest description of God's love. Like, he does not care how dirty and sinful and how disgusting you are, and the mistakes that he makes. He doesn't care, because he loves you for who you are. And I think that's probably the greatest disservice the church has done, is that we've put such a importance on behavior instead of letting people know that they belong. And that's what's so important.
Yeah, so true. And it's difficult enough to accept it without the church counteracting that with their own message. It's already hard enough to accept something for free that you didn't do anything to earn. We're just not wired to accept things for free and we didn't earn them. Right. It's not fair, right? It's not, in quotes, fair, right? Like, we don't like someone else getting something for free they didn't earn. We feel awkward accepting it if we didn't do something to earn it. And so already there's work to do for us to even be able to accept a gift, on top of the fact that the church is saying you actually don't deserve it because you're not doing the right thing.
That's right. That's right. The gift is conditional.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always conditional. I mean, according to some.
Tim, say something. Even though you don't got your a nice light like I do, go ahead and say something.
No, I've always had this where, like, growing up, people always told me that, one thing, God's concerns are not our concerns, right? Mm-hmm. But then I was always taught totally contrary to that. It was like that was just a saying, and then what I was taught was just totally against that. Like, it was like, this is what you need to do. You need to do A, B, and C and everything, right? Because these are the concerns. Mm-hmm. But all those things that, I felt like I was taught, I felt like it was like our concerns. Like human concerns, like our understanding of concepts and stuff, like what it is to be good, what it is to be bad, those the simple things, but I felt like a lot of that stuff was like our concepts, and I didn't really think, I don't know, I never really thought that God looked at things like that. And that was one of the things that kind of made me, question a lot of stuff. And then the church started putting Christmas trees up and stuff, and it just really just made me. When I was young, when I started in Maranatha, they did not talk about Christmas. They did not talk about holidays. There was not a Christmas tree in the sanctuary. But when I grew up, all this stuff that I was taught was stuff we didn't do. All of a sudden, we had Christmas trees in the sanctuary, and I was like, I don't
Shook
know.
your foundation.
It was just too much.
Yeah. It's funny, Tim, to that point. As I mentioned, when I moved here, the church I go to now, and I mentioned it was a little bit more liberal, progressive than I was, because again, there were things that I personally don't care about. Like, I don't care if someone's wearing a ring or jewelry, but it was so ingrained in me growing up that to experience it, I still had a gut feeling internally of, why would they do that?
Right.
Like, I don't care, and it's not wrong, but they know someone cares. So why don't they care? Someone cares, and why are they doing it?
Yes.
And it was this weird thing of, I don't care, but it's still bothering me somehow. And it took a while to kind of, over time, let that go. Even something, there's coffee at church, right? Like, who cares about, like, we pick one particular thing, caffeine is evil, but we can eat all the sugar we want, and everyone is, sick, and, but this particular thing is evil, but the other sins, we've agreed that it's okay, so that one's fine,
Yeah, I've met some of the most unhealthy vegetarians in my life in the church.
I'm one of them.
It's
I
it's
am
a
one
crazy thing. Yeah, it's a crazy thing. And you're right. I mean, I think that it's easier. Here's a poor analogy, but this is the best one I have. I'm not a guy's guy. I've never been a guy's guy. I'm not like Mr. Sports enthusiast. I don't like drive cars and know anything about cylinders or horsepower. I'm more of an artist and a writer and reader. So I'm always, from a sociological point of view, I'm always stuck with how men hang out with each other. Because all they do is they just talk about sports, right? Yeah, my team. You don't got a team. Do you pay their salary? What do you talk? They don't even know your name, right? So whenever like you hang out with men, there's always like this kind of code that you talk about, and you talk about sports, and you talk about maybe the stock market, and it's like that kind of stuff. And there's nothing ever after that. And I think the church does the same way. Like there's a code, and that is, if we can only talk about people's behavior, then it doesn't shine the light back on me, So if you're able to just keep focusing on where people are broken and where they're making mistakes. I mean, Jesus in his own words said to the Pharisees, I'm coming for sick people for a hospital, right? So we've forgotten that we're all screwed up, we're all messed up in the church. And so if we can look at someone who has a greater disease than we do, then it's shining the light off of us. And I haven't done it because I'm not brave enough, but I want to be like in some dude circle and just be like, hey man, what's your deep pain when you were 12 years old? Like just break through like all of this, does your car take synthetic oil? And be like, hey man, what's happening, man? What's happening in your heart? Because that's where I think what the church has done so well is that we've been able to kind of just change the subject so it doesn't focus on us.
Mm-hmm. Well, Chris had a question just, pertaining to that, like, what do we think that the church needed to do to stay relevant? Is that what you're thinking? Change the way that they address just everything?
No, I don't think the church, to be very honest with you, and I don't want to. I'm an optimistic guy, so I'm going to sound feudalistic right now, but I don't think the church can do anything. I think the church is dead. And the church is on its last wind. I work in hospice now. I work as a hospice administrator. I've been a hospice chaplain. I've been a hospice bereavement director, a counselor. I work with dying people, so I'm very comfortable with death talk and death conversation. And there's kind of this thing where a dead person does, and it'll freak you out if you're with a dead body. Sometimes they'll take a last exhale, and it can even happen like an hour later. So they've been dead. There's no pulse, but there's still a little bit of breath in their lungs, and you'll hear like a and
Oh,
it will
geez.
freak you out, right? Because you're like,
I see that right
what?
now.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
I'll be like, bye.
yeah. And I certainly believe that the church, the institutional church, is on that last breath. The church is already dead. Okay, and so here's an example. Um, not too long ago, the Queen died. Right? She died, 70 years on the throne. Guys, I mean, everybody knows that the royal monarch is irrelevant. Do we all know that? It's
Right.
Yes, we all
irrelevant.
know that.
I mean, all of England knows that. I mean, I lived in Canada. We have the Queen's face on our money, but we still know it's it's a relic of the past. But there's something that's kind of nice about having this, like, it's kind of nice, and it's not, they're not
Yeah.
getting in the way, they're not making a fuss. So you know what, the Queen died, and now we got Charles, and then we got what's his face, and then we got his son. It's gonna go on, but it's been dead, and I liken the modern Christian church to kind of the royal kingdom of England. We know it's irrelevant. We know it's unnecessary, but there's something kind of cute and folksy about it. And so it's,
They call it
the modern
folksy.
Christian church is dead, and you're never going to need Jesus. You're never going to need the church to get to Jesus. Like, I think we know that, right? So then what we say is,
Well,
okay,
some people don't.
I'm sorry.
Some
Oh
people
yeah,
don't.
you're right.
Some people think that they need the church. Some people think that they need, for example, the Bible. I told my,
Yeah, no,
I've
you're
told
you're right,
many
and
people
and
you
and
don't
let
need
those
these
people
guys.
kind of enjoy it. They like watching the Royals on Netflix. They enjoy this whole kind of world. But for me, um, you know, spirituality is not connected to religion.
That's how.
God and Jesus is not connected to the church. And so if you're asking me what can we do to change the church, my answer is nothing. Just let it just flail out, because it will. Like, we've seen it happen in Europe, right? Like, uh, in the last
Yes,
100 years, like,
yeah,
churches are what? Museums. Now they're
yeah.
turning them into beautiful restaurants. Even in America, there's a lot. Like, I think it's 200 churches closed down a month in America. Like, they can't even reach their mortgage. So for me, it's, what, I'm not here to try to like resuscitate something that's already dead. Let it just take its final breath, but let us find truth in something else that is new and beautiful, and that we don't have to apologize for what the church once did that was so destructive.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do see it. As we look around at how Christianity is perceived, and those that kind of fly the banner, at least in the U.S., it is very damaging, and it's self defeating when you look at how Christianity is perceived in the news, and what they're pressing for, and how they're trying to attain power and operate in the public
Yeah.
square. To me, it's a recipe for irrelevance over time, and kind of negative pushback. But I wonder, given the need that we do have, as one way of coming closer to God is through other people, given that this thing that we've used, this vehicle called religion, Christianity, we've used that for so long, how do we still maintain those connections in a way going forward with whatever is going to be kind of the new thing?
Yeah, so I had this theory, Christian, and I actually made a video about it, and it basically was this: the pandemic was going to kind of just help get rid of everybody who doesn't really commit to church, anyways, right? And it did. Like, we all stopped going to church. We all started watching church, and we're like, oh, this ain't right. I can't go through this is horrible. The microphones, the systems are terrible. Like, it's bad enough, like, when I'm sitting in there in person. And I believe that we were going to have a great departing of people. Like, people are going to kind of finally be like, hey, this was never really real for me. I don't need the church. I'm not going to come back. And I think we're seeing that. Like, the churches are never, ever going to fully be filled up again like it was pre-pandemic. And I think part of that is a good thing, because people are kind of realizing it was never for them. But at the same time, I do think you're right. We do need community. You do need, kind of brotherly love. But how can it be done? And a lot of it can be done not in your own town. Like we've realized, you can find like-minded people on Zoom and on social media, and you can find people who actually care deeply about God and God's love than trying to be stuck in some podunk town and having to just go to church because that's the only place and the only option you have. So there's many other ways that you can live out your faith, and it doesn't necessarily mean, and I'm saying that as somebody who goes to church every week. Okay, I go to church every week because
Yesterday.
yeah, and I go because I actually go to like a decent church. But if I wasn't in a town, or if I wasn't in a safe place, where I felt like I could really be who I am, then I would seriously find other avenues to like help grow spiritually, whether it's in a small group or an online community.
Yeah, it's interesting as I look at it, having also worked in the church. I don't anymore, but you realize for an organized religion to function, there has to be a lot of pieces in place to keep it moving. It's a lot of money, a lot of people, a lot of stuff has to happen to keep the thing working.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it doesn't work anymore. And I think, once a few of those pieces are no longer in place, to your point, it's been dying, but it starts to really rapidly crumble. And I think it'll push us to, maybe we don't have as many, paid ministers anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe it's more like it used to be, where, hey, we got a group. I happen to have a gift for leadership, so I'm going to lead this small group here. I'll kind of be the de facto person.
Yeah.
I'm not paid for that. I have a job, but on the side, I'm going to actually help guide and kind of lead and facilitate this smaller group. I think about our particular religion and how it really, it's not the only one, but it really professionalized ministry. Right. Like you are paid to only do this. There's many other denominations that aren't that way. You may be a pastor. This church may have 5 pastors. Those pastors have jobs, right? They're just also pastors on the weekend or as needed for this church. But I do think, as the economics change of this, I think it'll also kind of rapidly help kind of usher in this new, maybe more personal, what I think is a better idea, more personal role for, I guess, religion in quotes.
Which I guess is like leads us perfectly to what your to your website, your Concierge Ministry. That is interesting. The first time I ever heard of a concierge was I was watching a TV show about a concierge doctor. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a big, huge growing thing here in the States right now.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, medicine. Because I read, I think you did a Spectrum article, and you had mentioned that, like, because there was a doctor who was like tired of the insurance companies telling them how much time they could spend, and you were like, and she was like, I'm leaving or whatever. So that's very interesting. Can you like elaborate on that?
Sure.
Like what you do?
Yeah, sure. So, the idea behind concierge medicine or any other kind of, subspecialty is that you kind of just say, I'm only going to have 200 patients for the year. They're going to pay $10,000 a year. And I get to just focus on them instead of having 5,000 patients that you're kind of seeing, and you only have 15 minutes with them, and then you're not really building a relationship with them. And so then you're still making the money that you need to make a living, but you're only servicing these, particular patients. So let me be very clear. The way that Concierge Minister works is not, I don't have a subscription model where I only have like paid church members. Okay. I mean, I would love to do that, but I do find it a little bit anti-gospel. So, so it should be, like one of the people that I work with is a homeless person. They don't pay any money, but they're, in fact, this particular person I met, they chased me out of Panera because I was wearing that shirt, and it was a mom with 3 kids, and she was living in a homeless shelter, Christian Grassroots, which you know very well of, in our town. And she was like, "Hey, I need help," and I've been like, working with her on getting her, a job and getting her kids out of the shelter and trying to make right decisions. And so, Concierge Minister, it's a 501c3. It's in America. It's meaning it's a non-for-profit, and there are people who make contributions. They return their tithes and offerings to it, or they make a generous donation monthly or yearly. I make a pretty decent salary with what I do, so I don't take a penny from Concierge Minister. I take all the money that comes in for Concierge Minister goes back to my website, to making videos, to creating, new stuff, so people can kind of have resources for their faith. And it's really just me helping people kind of understand that God loves them, and if they have questions about their faith, I want to help them with that journey. I may not have all the answers, but I'm going to help them with that journey. And it's been such a crazy, ride, because it's been so many people just randomly finding my website, and me kind of going, God, I have a full-time job, please stop sending all these websites, messages on my website. But it really proves the point that people really have questions, and they're looking for a safe place that they want to go to, and they just need a kind of, sometimes they just need like you see a doctor and you're like sick, they're like, okay, let me give you an antibiotic for 10 days and I'll never see you again. Good luck. Goodbye. And a lot of times these are the kinds of people that I'm saying, like, I'm giving them an antibiotic for sin and moving them in the right direction, but I may never see them again. And then I have some people who I do what you call spiritual discipleship, and I meet with them every single month and I'm their spiritual, caretaker that's helping them, a spiritual coach that's helping them kind of make the decisions to grow spiritually as well. So, that's what Concierge Minister does. It's not a full-time. If someone's listening and wants to make a $10 million, donation, so I can do this full-time, I'd love to. But in the meantime, I do it just because I love God and I love people, and I've a pastor's heart, and I want to just help people along their journey.
It's so amazing. I was so struck when I saw that you were doing it. I'm like, this is such an amazing idea. And of course, Kumar is doing this, right? When I saw it, I'm like, this is absolutely what he was born to do, right? Like, you probably didn't realize, but when you were young and wanted to be a pastor, like, this is really probably what was in your heart, and it's here. And I think it's great to see. So how can folks find Concierge Minister? Are you on socials? What's the website? What's all the
part of it is I'm not hip and cool anymore, so I just have a website, conciergeminister.com. I do have a Facebook page called Concierge Minister, and then Insta and TikTok. I have those domains, but I don't know how to use it because I'm old. So so right now the best way is to reach me through conciergeminister.com, and to just check out what I have up there. I have some videos and devotionals and stuff that I do on a regular basis. And, I want to just, it's interesting. There's people all around the world that reach out to me, and it's so cool because I love how the world has flattened and we're able to kind of just find ways to support each other.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I have a friend, I was just thinking, I have a friend who, she lives in Pennsylvania, so she'll know who I'm talking about. Who kind of, slowly is drifting away from the church. She goes to church, like, for example, she left me a message just yesterday. It's like, I'm going to church because I have to play. So she plays the piano there. Otherwise, she's like, I don't know if I really want to, be in church. And she's been vocal about that. But she wants to, she wants to feel, she wants a relationship with God, basically. Mm-hmm. That's really what she wants. And I was thinking your website might be very interesting for her. I'm gonna send it to her. So that's very interesting.
Thanks. And one of the things
I like the concept.
One of the things we're starting actually is a men's group, and it's not like, I hate men's groups because it's always like, help me with porn, help me with sex, and that's all it's.
Listen, that could be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, we're just obsessed. We're obsessed with that, right? So, this men's group is about just how do men grow spiritually, and I'm not even doing it. It's somebody from Concierge Minister who I work with, and they're kind of leading the group because they have a heart for it, So it's going to be an online group that starts, and that's the kind of things that I'm hoping to do, is just help people find the right resources for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nice. Well, that was so great. Kumar, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been lots of fun.
Much. Thank you.
We really appreciate it. I've had a great time. We'll have to have you back again sometime.
Thanks for inviting me. I hope you guys gain one listener from this.
Absolutely. if we can just get one additional
listener,
we'll have all been worth it.
Perfect.
All been worth it. Yes. Well, thanks everyone for listening today and watching on YouTube. Find us everywhere. Unofficially opinionated. You guys know how to Google. You'll see us out there on Twitter. We're on
Yeah.
Facebook.
Twitter.
We're on YouTube. Even Instagram.
We're also on Instagram.
Even Instagram.
Yes, we are.
Thanks to Nate. He was pushing for that one. We are not on TikTok
Yes.
yet because we're kind of olds. We're
We don't know what
I'm the
to-
youngest and I'm
we
almost
don't know how to
40. So
TikTok.
we're not about that TikTok life, but all the other stuff you'll find us. So hang out, subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts as well now, so check that out.
Yes, we are.
And I guess we'll catch y'all next time. All right.
All right. Bye, Tim.
Bye, Tim.